How's it going, guys? So I drew a picture in my sketchbook. Well, I do that often, but this time I actually filmed it. Sorry about the lighting. It's just I don't have good lighting, so it is what it is. One day I'll get some good lights. This picture is just two OCs of mine, Sky and Raven. Sky's the one to the right, and Raven's the one to the left. Sitting in front of a convenience store or whatever. So in my last video, I did a sketchbook tour, and my sketchbook was titled Carless Again, and I said I'd talk about it in a video. So I'm going to take the opportunity to talk about that now. Anyways, it was a couple of months back now, because it's taking me too long to make this video. So me and two of my brothers and my brother's girlfriend were going to go up to Idaho to visit my cousin. My brothers live in Las Vegas and I live in Utah, so they were driving to my house where we would all then get in my car and drive all the way up to Idaho. My brothers and my sister-in-law drove up to my house, and I live off of a 20-minute dirt road that is complete garbage, but it was also raining that day a lot, and most of the road is clay, so it becomes borderline impassable in rainy weather. Anyways, my brother called me, and he had wrecked his truck and broke his steering shaft on his way down to my house. So I then went out in my truck to go pull him back to my house, and I then proceeded to wreck my truck in the clay. Basically what happened was I pulled up to where he was, and you couldn't turn around on the road, and you had such little control. Backing up wasn't really an option either. So I decided that I would drive past him, turn around in the sandy section, and then drive past him again. That way I was turned the right direction and I could pull him out. But he was at the spot on the road where there's a little bit of slant, so whenever I try to drive past him, it would just pull me into his truck, because the clay was just that bad that you had no control over where you went. So I then decided to drive off the road. Usually I would have gotten stuck in the sand driving off the road, but because it was raining, sand tends to be a lot nicer to you when it's wet. But regardless, I didn't want to get stuck in the sand, so I drove really fast, and then I also hit bushes, which gave me extra traction, so I drove really, really fast. And then when I jumped back onto the road, after I passed up my brother's truck, my brain just wasn't working, and I forgot that the road was a giant clay mess. Clay works a lot like ice does, if that helps you understand it. So when I jumped back on the road, instead of driving up the road like I would have, I went straight into the bank on the other side of the road and broke a lot of my plastic and lost some blinkers, and it was more just annoying than anything else. I'd already wrecked my truck before this, so a lot of my plastic was already broken and needing to be replaced anyways. But yeah, so that happened, and that wasn't cool. I then, trying to get past my brother's truck again, I couldn't get back up on the sandbank because there was a little bit of a lip on once I passed my brother's truck, so I couldn't get back up off the road, which was annoying. I tried it for a while and nearly got stuck multiple times. My brothers had to get me out of the sand, and then I decided to just park my truck and really think through the situation we had gotten ourselves in. And that's when my sister Vicky pulled up, because we were taking so long. She wanted to see what was wrong. And she had come in her truck that was already broken before this. There is something wrong with it. I don't understand trucks very well, but Basically, even if she wasn't pressing the gas or if her truck was in park, the engine would rev. And it was a really big problem because on this clay, the trick to it is to just drive really, really slow, and then you can not fly off the road or run into stuff or anything like that. And so she'd be driving around trying to keep control, and then her engine would rev and she'd spin out, and it was just like, well, it just wasn't working. So she was trying to do the exact same thing I did because she was stuck in the exact same spot I was. She'd said when she was starting to pull up that she thought, oh, maybe I should stop up here and walk up and see what's going on. But because it was raining and everything was a mess, she decided to stay in her car like I did and regretted her decision. Her truck, however, did not have four-wheel drive, so she was not able to get off the road where I did. Or at least it was a lot harder to. She spent a really long time, all of us spent a really long time trying to get her past my brother's truck. And we eventually decided to resort to just getting her truck off the road and leaving it there until the rain stopped because it wasn't working. So we spent hours and hours because we'd started this in the morning trying to get her truck off the road, and we did eventually get it off the road, hurrahs. But then we had my truck that still had to get past my brother's truck that's still broken down, and now her truck that's not working on these awful roads because it's broken already. And my brother-in-law showed up, and he had just gotten off of work, and he had parked his car because he knew what was going on way up the road where it was nice and walked all the way down to us. So he then got into my sister's truck to try and get my sister's truck turned around so we could drive it home. And within the first 5 seconds of being in it, he got it stuck. We had been spending, what took us so long to get anywhere was the fact that we were trying really hard not to slide into the bank and get stuck because there was a river going across the bank because that's where all the water was from the rain was gathering up. And yeah, we spent so many hours trying not to fall in that bank, and he got in it right away. So then we proceeded to go and get my truck, and we drove it past my brother's truck and past my sister's truck on the road. But what we did is my brother-in-law drove my truck while me and my brothers pushed it to keep it from sliding into the other vehicles. If only we had thought of that sooner, it would have saved us a whole buttload, a whole day's worth of trouble. But oh well, you think of stuff eventually. So then we used my truck and got my sister's truck unstuck. And then we drove the two vehicles, leaving my brother's and my brother-in-law's cars there, back home. And then back home, my brother-in-law fixed my sister's truck so it no longer had that revving problem. And then we got back in my vehicle afterwards to go get my brother-in-law's car that was still parked up the road. And my brother wanted to look at his truck to see what parts he needed to buy for it. We didn't make it there, though. Just outside of our gate, we hadn't gotten very far. My truck decided to throw a rod. So I don't really understand what all that means, but now I have a hole in my engine, and I need an entire new engine in my truck. At this point, we really were thinking that the day was cursed. We called my sister, and she came down in her newly fixed truck to come save our butts. But again, we had towing problems. Her truck doesn't have four-wheel drive. I wasn't able to turn my vehicle around because the road was too tight for that. So she was towing my truck back to the property. I was going backwards. I had no power steering and no, the brakes, no power, what is it called? Brake fluid stuff. The brakes are also hard to press, as well as the steering wheel being hard to turn. So we spent well after dark trying to get my truck back to the property. We were pulling it up really steep sandy hills, and my sister's truck was continually getting stuck over and over again in the sand. We were all very tired and sore. We decided to quit trying to get the vehicle, my truck, back to the house because my sister's car was not capable of doing the job, and just park it off the side of the road. So we then spent hours trying to just get my truck parked off the side of the road. There was only one pull-off that we could get it to, and the pull-off only fits one car, so you can't pull it off the side of the road because there was no room for the truck pulling to drive, as well as the truck needing to be parked. So we were trying to push it by hand and whatnot, and there were steep hills, and it was a very slow process, and having the brakes not working was also making it really difficult. My sister had the genius idea at one point to just start the engine up and park it. So yeah, I started the truck. It sounded like complete, like nails in a blender, but oh well. And I pulled it off the side of the road and I parked it. And then we went home. We didn't drive out to get my brother-in-law's truck or check on my brother's truck because at that point it was way too late. And we went home, and we had called my dad to come out and save our butts because my dad actually has a working four-wheel drive truck. And he wanted to get our vehicles out of the road that night because, I mean, it's not really legal to leave your vehicles in the middle of a road. So he wanted to get them out of the road, and we were exhausted and just wanted to go to sleep. So to prevent ourselves from falling asleep while we waited for our dad to get there, we decided that we'd watch a movie. We're going to watch Princess Mononoke, and we got very little into the movie, and my DVD player died. And I swear that was the worst thing that happened all day long. Like, it was the cherry on top. It was so awful. Like, all of us were so done at that point, and we spent so long trying to get my DVD player to work. We tried so many different things and nothing worked, and we were so defeated at this point. So we texted my dad and we convinced him to let us just get the vehicles the next day, and we went to sleep. So then the next day comes around, and the next day was just as hard as the first. We got up early in the morning and we started with my brother's Garrett's truck. Well, we dropped my brother-in-law off so he'd get his car. At this point, the rain had stopped and the roads were decent enough again that they weren't too big of a problem. So my brother-in-law drove his truck home, so that problem was solved. And then my brother's plan for his truck was to pull his truck to a pull-off off the side of the road where we would then fix it up and he'd drive his truck home. But he didn't have any steering because his steering shaft was broken, so we had no control over what direction his truck went on the roads, and it wanted to go everywhere but the road. So it was this back and forth where my dad would pull him forward like 3 feet, and then he'd back up like 2 feet to get the steering straight again, and then he'd get pulled forward 3 feet and back 2 feet, and we got very little, very slowly, and it took a very long time. My dad and my brother eventually got the genius idea of my brother just riding on his brakes while he was getting towed. I don't know how it worked exactly, but it worked because it prevented the truck from just going whatever direction while my dad was pulling it, and then it made the truck get pulled in the direction my dad was pulling his truck when he rode on the brakes. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but it worked. So that's what we did. He eventually got it off the side of the road, fixed it up. That took a long time. Drove it to the property, fixed it up some more. And while he was working on his truck, me and my dad and some other of my family members worked on getting my truck unstuck. Well, not unstuck, just pulled back to the property. And it took a lot longer than it should have because of where we had parked my truck, and how we had parked my truck wasn't really set up for getting pulled out very easily. We could have thought about that more when we parked it, but we were already having trouble enough parking it. It was just the angle, like, we had to make a really sharp turn, one that was too sharp to be made in one go. So it was lots of forward and backwards and forward and backwards and forward and backwards, which proves to be a very large problem when your truck is dead. We weren't very willing to start the engine up as much as possible, and so going backwards is extremely difficult because it's uphill and you can't pull it uphill. So yeah, that took a long time. And we eventually got my truck back on the road, where my dad very easily and effortlessly pulled me back to the house. Oh my gosh, we spent so long the day before. I wish we'd just quit earlier. And so we got back to the house, and my truck has just been parked by the forklift, and it has not moved since this tragic day. And my brother's truck got all fixed up, and his truck's doing really nice now, and I still just need to get a new engine for my truck. But that was the glorious... It took us the entire day, by the way, to get my truck back to the house and my brother's truck fixed. It was a hassle. So that was my cursed day of vehicle problems. I am driving my brother's truck around right now, my younger brother's truck. He's not old enough to drive yet, and his truck was currently not working when my truck was broken down, so I spent a while fixing it. Isn't true. I spent a while buying parts for it, and my dad and my brother fixed it. And it was funny because when we were at my dad's house fixing my truck, my brother Garrett was also still working on his truck from when he had wrecked it at my house, and my brother Vernon was working on his truck because he was having car problems, and my brother Leaf was working on his truck because he was having car problems, and then I was working on my brother's truck because I was going to borrow it until I could save up enough money to buy a whole new engine for my truck. So that was kind of fun for having an unplanned truck working party at my dad's house. We all just showed up at the same time to use my dad's shop, and we all fought over tools like siblings do. Well, that was it, and I hope you guys all have a good, nice night, day, or whatever it is. Bye.